George, and I'm going to call you just once. I'm going to call you Sir George because I've known you so long. It seems silly to start calling you Sir George, but you are Sir George, and well done, mate. And this is the 50th anniversary of you starting this Villa Maria wine company of yours. Is that right?
Right. Yes. When I started, it was actually it was all port sherry and liqueurs. None of the wines you're tasting here today actually virtually existed in New Zealand. It's amazing to imagine it was only port and sherry.
I remember the first time I went to New Zealand that I had to judge the national show, and these blokes kept coming up and saying, "It's my turn for the medal for the sherry. It's my turn for the medal for the Madeira." And I said, "What do you mean Madeira and sherry? What are you doing making Madeira and sherry in New Zealand?" They said, "Well, we've always made it, it's my turn." I tasted the wines, and I said, "Fellas, if you want to be a world wine power, you've got to stop making sherry and port and Madeira." And they did, but they didn't like it, George.
No, it was a very old generation, although, funny enough, in their own home kitchen, they always drank dry red and dry white. But the consumers got the port and sherry. That's what they liked, because it was a very unsophisticated market.
Yeah, well, unsophisticated market, it may have been then, but it certainly isn't now. Because one of the wonderful things about going to somewhere like Australia or New Zealand is that all the taxi drivers can have a really good conversation about wine with you in the taxi. But we've thought of the New Zealand, the rise in New Zealand wine is on the back of Sauvignon Blanc. And I have to say, thank goodness for that, because Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand created a flavour and a style the world had never seen before, and it took the world by storm, and we in the UK love it. Keep giving it to us sharp and fresh and green and vivacious, and I promise you we will keep paying the price and we'll keep drinking the wine. But are there other things in white wine that you want to start doing?
Actually, I cannot understand why more people don't drink Riesling. Riesling is the queen of grapes. It's a fantastic wine, but I do believe that we in New Zealand have got the cool maritime climate, actually, which makes our Sauvignon Blanc, but also suits Riesling. And I believe the reason a lot of people over the last 20 or 30 years have been confused with Riesling. There's been oscillator styles, Spätlese styles, been sweet, they've been low alcohol. When they're low alcohol, they don't have texture. But today, I believe that we've corrected that, and I would like as many people as possible to try our 2011 dry Riesling. It's a wonderful luncheon wine, it's a good drinking wine, and I'm sure we've learned that we can't have low alcohol, but we don't want high alcohol, so around about 11.5 to 12%. You get a little bit of texture, but it's a wine that ages well. It's just wonderful drinking. I love it, and actually, funny enough, it's almost every winemaker's favourite wine as well. So as a consumer, I really encourage you to relive and retry Riesling.
Well, I'm going to see whether George is a man of his word or not. George, there's a glass of Riesling for you. I'm giving it to you basically because I want one as well. Excuse me the slurping noises, but this is just how it is. This is called live television. Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you mean, because you were being almost polite just then about why people didn't like Riesling. You didn't mention the words Liebfraumilch, supermarket own label Hock, and the one above all, Pease Porter Mikkelsberg. The very mention of Pease Porter Mikkelsberg makes me start to shiver with fright, and I feel a malarial fever coming on. But that's why it is. I mean, I agree with you. Riesling is a marvellous cold climate grape. The Germans make wonderful world-class wines with it, but they gave us all the rubbish, so we just turned away against things German. But that's bloody nice, that, because it's actually got a honey flavour.
It's a mandarin lime flavour, but it's also just got that little bit of residual sugar, just slightly residual, but again it's got a dry finish. So,
Well, you can see that George drinks more of it than me because he got Mandarin and lime when I was just stuck on the honey. But now he's been talking about the residual sugar. I'll get that for the honey. But actually, the thing about it is Riesling. It gets you here. It makes your mouth water. That's why Riesling works. It's one. And by the way, there's loads of Rieslings to try at the Free Wine Men show today, and all of them will make you want to have another glass of wine. You have a great big oaky Chardonnay, you might say, enough is enough. I need now to go and have a cold shower and a lie down. And think about the English rugby team, for instance, George. I'm sure you want to talk about them. They're a very fine bunch of people. Going to come and show you how to play rugby in a month or two. But something like a big Chardonnay, you might think a glass is enough. Something like a Riesling, and that's the Sauvignon Blanc job as well, but both these grapes do it, they make your mouth water. They make you think, oh, there's a wonderful cheese table over there. I need to go and try some of that. Oh, there's a wonderful artisan smoke shop over there. I really need to see what they've got. It makes you want to eat, it makes you want to drink more, and it makes you just feel brighter and fresher. And in my case, a more attractive, wittier, and far, far more likely to impress the other sex.
and it also is a natural wine. It has not got any oak influence, or as far as I was concerned, probably 95% of Rieslings don't have oak. You're really tasting the pure grape juice turned into a nice dryish wine.
Absolutely right, George. No oak, because oak is a wonderful thing, but a lot of people don't like oak anymore. A lot of people, you give them even quite lightly oak. Oak is that vanilla-y kind of rich flavour, but it doesn't have to dominate the wine. It can be quite delicate, but as George is saying, with Riesling, come on fellas, you don't want a vanilla-y oak barrel with Riesling, because it completely throws aside everything Riesling stands for. Delicacy, freshness, beautiful acidity, mouth-watering acidity, drinkability. Anyway, by the way, before I leave you, I want to try some red wine with you. And I've chosen, because George is not only a great innovator in the white wine world, but he's been one of the first people to take red wine seriously, particularly in the North Island of New Zealand. There's a place called Hawke's Bay. There's a place called Gimlet Gravels, which I went to first when it was, I think it was some kind of speedway track. And it was completely devoid of vegetation. It had a few feral pigs and a few, feral New Zealanders probably hanging around the place. It looked as though the chances of it making anything decent in his life were absolutely zero. But when I saw it, I thought, this is wonderful. It is land that resembles closely the incredibly gravelly, infertile land of the best parts of Bordeaux. I remember going back and saying to George a long time ago, someone should plant there. Well, are you the biggest people in the Hawke's Bay now? Gimlet Gravels?
Yes, we are actually. We're lucky we recognised the area about 20 years ago when it was only about $1,000 an acre. We managed to buy about 150 acres, and since then we've doubled it. So we're very, very lucky. It's a fantastic area. It's about 2 degrees warmer than the rest of Hawke's Bay, and we're turning out sort of fantastic red wines there.
What you need for red wine, you've got to be warm enough to ripen the grapes. It takes more sun, more heat to ripen a red grape than a white grape. But you don't want it to bake. You don't want the whole thing to just sit in the sun baking to death, because that's the way you kill the flavours. And the lovely thing about Hawke's Bay is it is 2 degrees warmer than some of the areas closer to the sea, but it's still not 2 degrees hot. It's just cool to warm. And it's that wonderful sense of, all of us in this room who are Irish and English and Scottish and Welsh and God knows what, the cool to warm is what makes us sort of get excited. And when you have a red wine made when it's just warm enough to ripen the grapes, that's when the red wine is best. And the Syrah, which we've got here, is just able to ripen in this area of Hawke's Bay in the North Island. And I think that's why it is such a beautiful, delicious, peppery, spicy, but dry red wine. And again, it's just like your Riesling, George. I have a mouthful, I want another one.
Actually, with the Syrah, the private in Syrah, it's not a big blockbuster. It's really quite a delicate red wine, but it's got great length, a beautiful white, sort of white pepper style, more like a Rhone Valley Syrah. Probably nothing like the Australian Syrahs, which tend to be bigger, sort of sweeter, heavier style. So, to say, you'll find delicate, white pepper, very sophisticated red. And funny enough, we only discovered this about 15 years ago. A few people planted Syrah, and we had a big, it was at the Pinot Noir conference. We invited all the wine writers, journalists to Hawke's to taste our Merlot and our Cabernet, which, mind me, don't get me wrong, they're extremely good. But everybody, there was just a few trial Syrahs, and everybody raved and wrote about Syrahs. So suddenly there's been an explosion in plantings, and we haven't got a large area. It'll always probably be about 1% of what Australia can produce, but what we are producing is incredibly exciting. So must try the Syrah. It's fantastic, and I think there'll be a number of different ones here, from the lighter-bodied ones to ones that are a bit bigger and heavier. Yeah.
Well, as George says, they haven't got as much as Australia. They've only got 1% of Australia, but I will remind George that all the best things come in small packages. Thank you, mate. Bloody good to see you over here. Well done on being 50 years. Are you 50 years old, or? Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever George is, I wouldn't dream of asking him, but whatever it is, he acts a lot younger, and thank God for that. Thank you, mate.